Greetings, this is Jerry. Today I'm going to show you some Hopalong Hollowscaping from a garden we've not visited before. And that's because until a few days ago, it did not exist. Now I'm sitting on a slope right now, which is behind the house and right off the courtyard. Now we have a lot of slopes around here, but this is a slope that I always intended to turn into several garden beds, and I did mark out all the spaces for the garden beds with timbers and logs with the intention of actually filling these in one day with serious, lovely plants. But I never got around to doing it. I never got serious about it. The only thing I ever replanted of worth in this garden is this crepe myrtle tree and about a dozen daylilies, which turned into an entire hill and slope full of daylilies. In fact, they pretty much have taken over the entire area. About a half a dozen daylilies turned into an entire field of daylilies, which I find very beautiful. However, that is not what I intended for this garden to be. And as you can see, it is covered in weeds, and more weeds. In this case, I'm a little bit grateful for that creeping Charlie because it really is easy to pull. I'm doing quite a transformation in this garden bed for the last few days. It's undergone a lot because let me tell you that I did start out with that. That's what everything looked like. Pretty bad. I had to thin out a lot of daylilies, and I had a few patches of things growing here and there, such as this zinnia patch and maybe a couple sedum plants. But other than that, that is all that I had here except for weeds. So I'm doing a major rejuvenation in this section. And I've done all this using my own method of landscaping, which is what I call Hopalong Hollowscaping. It's Hopalong Hollowscaping because it's very old world. It's very much like my books. I just use what I have. I take a lot of recycled things, old logs, old timbers, old concrete, whatever I can find, old brick, and I create it, use it in a way that's very creative and makes a more of a country style, casual, easygoing garden, not anything you would see in a garden magazine. In this makeover, you're expecting a formal, picture-perfect garden. You're not going to find it here because that just simply is not the way I garden. Just face it, most of us don't have buckets of money to spend on buckets of plants from the nursery, and these days they're even more expensive than ever. So we need to find ways to create a garden where we do not have to go out and spend a load of cash. And that's what this video is about. It's about being able to be within a budget and create a garden, whether it's a large one or a small one. If this is going to be a huge garden, it's going to take me weeks to get it to where I want. So we're just starting in little sections, working in one section at a time. Something else most of us don't have is big, expensive earth-moving equipment. We are dependent on our own backs and our knees and our energy. And I want to say this, I'm 68 years old this week, and I do all this gardening by myself. I dig my holes, I plant my weeds, I do everything, unless it's an extremely difficult task, and I ask James to do it for me. Other than that, I do it on my own. He's not a gardener, he doesn't want to garden, and I don't expect him to. So he takes care of the lawn, and the gardens are my hobby. So I don't expect anything from him. So what I'm saying is, if I can do it at my age, then so can you. My video today is to encourage you. If you've got a really ugly spot in your yard, maybe it's just a patch of grass or a bunch of weeds, and you're looking at it and you're thinking, well, first of all, I don't have a ton of money to go spend on nursery plants. And second of all, I mean, how much work is that going to be? And what am I going to do to fill that? It looks so hopeless. Well, you know what? Nothing is hopeless. No piece of land is hopeless. Any piece can be turned into a garden. Now, one of the few plants that I did purchase for this garden slope are these echinacea or coneflowers, and that's because at the end of the summer a lot of these plants are going to go on sale at the nurseries. They're going to go for very low prices, and that's what was the case with these. So they don't look so great anymore. The leaves are turning yellow. They've already bloomed. Well, that's good though, because these are beginning to develop their seed heads, and as you can see by this one right here, you remember that we collected seeds last week. This is just full of little seeds, and I'm just going to let them drop right into this new garden. As perennials, these will die down to the ground during the winter, and underneath the ground, those roots will be getting stronger and healthier, and then when spring arrives, they'll start sprouting right back up through the earth, and hopefully we'll have some babies from these seeds that I let drop. Another way to expand a new garden without spending any money is by going into your own gardens. Perhaps you have a garden that has reseeded and you have a lot of excess plants, whatever they may be. Maybe they're black-eyed Susans, which have a tendency to really expand. But these are foxglove. They self-seeded in another garden. It has given me several extra plants over there where I don't need them. And this is a perfect spot for them. So I've got about 10 foxgloves here. I've dug them up, and I'm going to put them under the crepe myrtle tree here and simply add to this garden, and it's not costing me anything but my time and effort. The coreopsis here, this is a yellow coreopsis, which is also a perennial. I just simply liberated that from another garden along with this small one and also this lovely sage right here. I had 2 sages. I put 2 on this side of the garden, liberated them from another garden of mine. Now this is another plant I purchased. Now you know this is mum season and you can buy mums just about everywhere. But can you buy mums like this? Look at the size of this plant. They were selling these at our little farm store down the road for $14. Now I could never pass up a perennial of this size and magnitude and magnificence for $14. So I actually bought a few of them. And I had up in the barn these old galvanized tubs that have probably been on this farm for the last 40 years, and they have no bottoms because they have completely rusted out. But that's where the Hopalong Hollowscaping comes in. I place these old tubs right here in the garden, fill them with really good soil, and plant these chrysanthemums in the tubs. I did 4 tubs. Now, because there is no bottom in that tub, those roots for the mums will go down into the earth. They will always be able to get a lot of water and nourishment from the earth instead of drying out in a container. Personally, I have a lot of trouble growing things in containers. So this alleviates that problem. And they look great. Those galvanized tubs, they look great with the timbers, the logs, and all the broken concrete in our Hopalong Hollowscaping slope. Another great way to get your garden growing with small bushes and trees, because you always want some of those if you have a large garden space, which I do, is to take cuttings off of things like crepe myrtles. I discovered how easy it was to propagate the Rose of Sharon quite by accident. I needed little twigs to set next to my pea seeds so that they could climb up to the trellis, and this would have been a support. So I cut a lot of these last year. I just put them in the soil next to the pea seeds. Lo and behold, every single one of them grew roots and turned into itsy bitsy trees. They even had flowers on them, Rose of Sharon blossoms on them, and they were only 2 feet tall. So this is a fantastic way for me to fill in some of that garden just by taking a lot of cuttings off of this Rose of Sharon. And I'm just going to take a piece about that big. I'm going to cut it at an angle, strip off the leaves, and stick it in a bucket of soil or straight into the ground. Very same thing with your chrysanthemums. Just cut them off after they've done their bloom. Cut off all the tops. Take that little root, strip off all the leaves, pop it into the soil. Now I want you to notice these concrete steps, because this is simply broken concrete. It's from the patio that's behind me, where we took it out in pieces, and we took a lot of the large pieces and used them to build this large stairway up the hill. Now, the hill has a long ways to go, as you can see. Right now it's the stairway to nowhere because we have not finished it. We need more broken concrete, and we're all out of it. But this was a lot of work along this edge here because there was nothing here. 3 days ago, the stone steps were here, yes, because they've been here for a couple of years now. But there was nothing next to this. Running along this side, it was just nothing but, well, I'll show you. This is what was running along the side of this. Now, this slope is tricky because it is full of slate. It is rocky, it is difficult to dig, and the only thing that it grows generally is really bad grass. So this is what it looked like before, all along the edge. So what I did is I tried to turn it into something like a raised bed. There's some more chrysanthemums. So following the curve of that gully, I just used the broken concrete to create a wall, which enabled me to add a lot of compost into more like a raised bed, improving the soil here and enabling me to plant some things along the edge. And who knows, this wall might go further up the hill as time goes by, but for now this is good enough. Right here. Goes all the way up the hill. Here's some more ugly stuff. Goes all the way up the hill to the pump house. And when it rains, the pump house overflows, it comes rolling down. The water just pours down, makes this ugly gully. I'm starting to get it cleared out a little bit. I will fill it then with just some stone from the creek. And then it runs along here, along this other bit of concrete step, and it runs right down that dry creek, which follows the curve of the slope and goes into the creek in the front of the house. Well, this is definitely a work in progress, and it's something that's going to take weeks and weeks to get it done because, as you can see, it is a huge area. And I have to separate each one of those beds with logs, weed them, compost them, and seed them. And that's something I can do over the winter months, actually. Zone 7 here, we can sow seed for quite a long time. And some things just want to be sown in the winter. The fact is, a lot of seeds, such as poppies, larkspur, phlox, bachelor buttons, love in a mist, scabious, all sorts of seeds are fine being sown in the cold months. So we've got a lot left to do here, but this was just a beginning. So we will come back to this garden over the next couple weeks and months to check it out and see what's going on. So I'm starting to gather the slate to fill in the dry creeks. That bare earth needs covering with stone, and so I have a long way to go there. And I've got a lot of logs to use on the slopes to make separate beds on that vast slope right there. So this is definitely a wintertime project that it will take months to get it all together, but hopefully by spring everything will be coming together beautifully. In the meantime, let's take these jolly pumpkins and do something useful and beautiful with them. Although they're great just sitting there, I think we can come up with some other ideas for these great pumpkins. Well, it seems like I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for my dahlias to open. And now that they are opening, it's very odd because this dahlia, I didn't even order this dahlia. Not really greatly into this bright orange and yellow, so I would never order a dahlia like this. And I got 25 of them, and they all look like this. So they were supposed to be a pom-pom, sort of a deep crimson ball called a Natal, but this is what they sent me. And when I'm looking through their catalog, I can't even find this dahlia. So if anybody knows what this is, I'd really like to know. Really like, it's sort of a peachy orange. But then again, it's orange, right? And also, I'm pretty sure I did not order this either. I didn't know. I'm beginning to wonder if these would ever open. So here we have a lot of our fall bloomers, which would be the dahlias, the mums, the Georgia sunflowers, the globe amaranth, and the blue salvia are still going in the garden. So we're going to take these and make some beautiful flower arrangements using those fun pumpkins. Whew. A lot of pumpkin seeds. I'm saving those. The seeds in this heritage blue pumpkin are quite different looking, and I'm definitely going to save these, dry them out, and plant them next year. Pumpkins are pretty expensive, so if you can grow your own, that's fantastic. 2 beautiful pumpkin vessels in which to put all our autumn flowers, and I'm going to be using the flower frogs inside of these. And this is my favorite flower frog, and you can see why, because it changes sizes. So those go right inside the pumpkin. And if you don't have flower frogs, you can always use chicken wire and just build a dome across the top. Fill these with water all the way to the top and start doing the creative part. I absolutely envisioned these beautiful tangerine colored dahlias in this, with this blue pumpkin. Just love these 2 colors together. There are plenty of videos online on arranging flowers, but actually I think the main thing to remember is as soon as you pick them, get them into some water. And you have to also strip those bottom leaves off to keep them from soiling the water too quickly. So if it's going to be under the water, take the leaves off. I've been making bouquets online in my videos for about 3 years now, and they're all different. They all look different every single time, and I'm just putting together the flowers that I have in the garden and loving it. Look at these. I like the tops of these. Are the Georgia sunflowers. They grow about 10 to 12 feet tall. They're blooming right now in the garden. But what I really love are these heads after the petals fall off. Those are really great. They look a little bit like Cruspedia, something which I have not been able to grow. But very beautiful. Very simple, and it looks different from every angle. So I like this one. If you really want to be professional about this, there are a lot of great sites online right now. A lot of great YouTube channels that can give you all kinds of hints for floral arranging with a more professional look. But you know me, I am just perfectly imperfect, and that's the way it is. So these are interesting. These are little beauty berries from off the bush behind me. So I'm going to toss these in because those berries are so pretty, and I'm going to put those right in the middle and flowing out the sides. Get those. Aren't they sweet? So what I really want to highlight in here are these big, beautiful dahlias. Hard to miss them, but sometimes they have a tendency to get buried on the bottom. And then these beautiful little light-colored butter yellow mums just really add a lot to this bouquet, because this purple and yellow together, just beautiful. And then the little gomperinas, I mean, everything looks pretty nice. I especially love the color of this pumpkin. Going to town. We got a lot of bouquets out of that grouping of flowers. Look at all those. Today we're making a pumpkin soup. We made a pumpkin soup last year on video about the same time of year from fresh pumpkin. We're going to do it again, only this recipe is slightly different. And this is a little more special to me because I'm making this for my grandson Finley, who is 2 years old, lives clear across the country, so he actually won't be able to sit here and enjoy it with me. But I'm hoping that he and his mommy will make it together. Because Finley recently visited a pumpkin farm and he won a very small pumpkin as an award for some contest. And his dad says he likes that pumpkin so much that he takes it to bed with him at night. Kids do funny things like that. But anyway, I thought it'd be fun to show Finn that you can do lots of different things with pumpkins. So we are going to make some Finley pumpkin soup today. Going to finely mince half a cup of onion. Now I've already chopped up and washed this pumpkin from outside. The big yellow pumpkin. But I'm also going to cut out this pumpkin that I grew in the garden. And I'm just going to cut it into chunks, and I'm going to steam this until it's nice and soft. So we're cutting our pumpkin into 1 and 2 inch chunks, steaming it until soft. You can see that those pumpkin skins are pretty thick. So unless you're wanting to save your pumpkins, your pumpkin shape to use for a flower vase or a soup tureen, you can actually split up that pumpkin and bake it in the oven, in the skin, and then when it's soft you can just scoop it right out rather than steaming it. So we've got all those pumpkin pieces steaming over a high heat, and it really doesn't take that long to soften them up. Pumpkin is nice and soft. Mash our pumpkins into a nice mushy puree. Oh, beautiful. Look at that beautiful color right there. And what we need are about 3 cups of this pumpkin puree. I think we have more than enough here to make the soup. We want 1/4 cup of brown sugar. Together, a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, a 1/2 teaspoon of cloves. Now we're going to saute our onions, our 1/2 cup of onions, in 2 tablespoons of butter on medium heat. And when that's nice and soft, we're going to add just 1 tablespoon of flour. Mix that in real well. Now, you may notice I had to switch pans because my pan was too small. So make sure you have a big enough pan. Anyway, I just added 4 cups of chicken broth. And now I'm going to add all the other ingredients. I'm adding 1 cup of applesauce. And I'm adding 1/2 cup of cream. I'm adding my brown sugar and my spices. And the last thing I'm going to put in is the 3 cups of pureed pumpkin. As I've been cooking this, I've readjusted the recipe a little bit, so the final recipe will be beneath the description. But I added a little more butter, a little more pumpkin, and a little more brown sugar. Now what you're going to do is you're just going to let this simmer for about 25 minutes. Then it's going to cool off, and you're actually going to puree this again in a blender in batches. See, there's why. Now after you've let that soup simmer for about 25 minutes, put it in batches in your blender and puree it so it's nice and smooth soup, more like a bisque. And that's the last thing you need to do, and then refrigerate it for about 8 hours. Now for our bowls, pumpkin bowls, we're just going to cut up the top of the pumpkin, our little pumpkins. We're going to scoop all the seeds out, and we're going to clean that pumpkin out pretty nicely so that it looks like this. By scooping out that pumpkin, you can clear it out really nicely. And look at all those seeds you have. So you can take some of those seeds and toast them to eat. And you can take another bunch of those seeds, put them aside, dry them out, put them in an envelope, and plant them next year. And have your own patch of little pumpkins. Our second pumpkin recipe for the day is from the cookbook of one of my very favorite all-American artists, and that is the wonderful Charles Wysocki, the Americana Cookbook. On the flap of the book, it tells us that these are mouth-watering Heart of America recipes, a joyous star-spangled celebration of America's rich heritage. And this recipe is for pumpkin patch tea bread. Love this little verse here in the front. For pottage and puddings and custards and pies, our pumpkins and parsnips are common supplies. We have pumpkins at morning and pumpkins at noon. If it were not for pumpkins, we should be undoon. Pilgrim verse circa 1630. So before we get started, let's take a look at one of these wonderful paintings in this cookbook. Charles Wysocki was a wonderful artist. I think he passed away 20 or 30 years ago, at least. But I discovered him way back in the 1980s when he had a lot of exposure with his greeting cards and his calendars and his prints, and everything was focused on American heritage, patriotism, and all the good things and the things that are wondrous and joyful about this country. And it's one of the things I loved about him. He saw the good, and he portrayed it beautifully in his idealized paintings. So let's get on with it, and this is going to be a really easy and quick recipe. If you hear a little bit of tinkling in the background, that's our new kitten, Titus, and he's wearing a bell so we can keep track of him because he does like to disappear, especially when I let him outside. I'll introduce you to him in a little while. The first thing you want to do is preheat your oven to 350, and then you want to grease and flour 2 9 by 5 by 3 inch loaf pans. That's what we've done here already, except that I've only got one, so I'm going to have to bake mine one at a time. 2 eggs. Okay, 2 eggs, beaten. 1/2 cup of oil, 1/3 cup of water, and 1 cup of your pumpkin puree. Now you can use this from a can, or you can use the puree that you had left from your real pumpkin. To sift 1 3/4 cup of flour with our spices. And the spices that we're using, a 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, and 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and a little over 1 teaspoon of salt, sift those all together. Now we're going to mix those dry ingredients to the pumpkin mix. And lastly, we are adding 1 1/2 cups of granulated sugar and our 1/3 cup of raisins and 1/3 cup of walnuts. Very nice. That cat is going crazy over there. He's so cute. You're a little stinker, Titus. Next, we're going to spoon this into the loaf pans and cook it at 350 for 1 hour. 1 loaf pan, and I used the rest of my batter in muffin tins. So let's see how that works out. So into the oven these go. So while the bread is baking, you can meet Titus. He's finally worn himself out. This is Titus. And Titus came to us about 3 weeks ago when my friend found him eating out of her cat's dish out on her porch, and he was a feral kitty. But believe me, he's pretty tame by now, and he's having a good life. But we got him just in time because we recently lost our 17-year-old kitty, who finally had to be put to sleep because she was very, very old and decrepit. But, you woke up? Okay, buddy. Good. Oh, back to sleep. Okay. Well, anyway, this is Titus. Now, back to our food. Everything is ready. The bread took about 40 minutes in our oven, and the muffins took about 30. And they taste delicious, and we're about to try Finley's pumpkin soup. We try our soup and our bread. Let's take a look at this beautiful dinnerware by my favorite company, Bordalo Pinheiro. Once again, a pale butter yellow. I'm not quite sure the name of this pattern. But what I really love these beautiful little snack plates with these cups with the very finest and faint indentation of tiny flowers. Because this particular meal was made specifically to honor my little grandson Finley, and this is Finley's pumpkin soup. I wanted him to have a tea to drink with his soup as well, and so we're going to have sleepy time herbal tea. This is perfect for a young one to have, and a 2-year-old is perfectly fine with chamomile, lemongrass, and spearmint is what's in this tea. My daughter-in-law sending me teas from all over the world. But this time I'm sending her this tea because this is the tea that's simply going to be going with this meal. And now we're going to talk about a special teapot. Today's teapot was made by Porcellier in the USA. You don't find too many things made in the USA, but this was made between the 1920s and the 1940s. And that's what they really concentrated on were lots of beautiful patterned teapots. I particularly like this one because it's cobblestones with this charming little gal here, little sweet little farmer girl collecting flowers. And this is called vitreous hand decorated china. So each little figure is going to look a little bit different because they were all hand painted. But these are really heavy, good quality teapots, and they come in so many different patterns and styles. So this one was mine, but because I want my daughter-in-law, Hera, and my grandson to be having tea with their pumpkin soup, I bought this one for them. So this is also the same company, the same date. This is about an 80-year-old teapot, and just another one of the patterns from Porcellier. They're really sweet. I've seen at least 20 different patterns. It would be something really nice to collect, I think. So what's the verdict on the soup and the bread? Absolutely delicious. Finley's pumpkin soup is a huge success. Let me tell you that it's creamy. It's a little bit spicy with those really delicious autumn spices, the cinnamon and the nutmeg. You can taste those. It's just sweet enough, not terribly sweet, but it's also very rich, and it's just kind of buttery even. Now, I did switch the recipe a little bit, and the true recipe that I use will be in the description below because I added a little more brown sugar and a little more butter to the recipe, and I think a little more pumpkin as well. But you can adjust it accordingly. But it's really, really, really good. The bread is really wonderful. It is moist. It is pumpkin-y. It smells great. Oh, you can freeze it if you want. So I hope you will try these recipes. I can't wait to hear about how this turns out, Finley's soup turns out at your house, Hera and Justin. And I think you'll like it a lot. I know he will. And when we're done, at least when I'm done with these bowls, I'll go feed these bowls to the donkeys. As long as I put a little salt on it, they'll love it. We'll be back with the Hopalong Hollow Emporium a little bit later than I expected, and that's because I have an art show to do locally, not too far away, but that's within about a week. So I will not be able to do my Emporium until after that show. In the meantime, I hope you'll cook a pumpkin or use one for a beautiful vessel for your flowers. So from Hopalong Hollow, this is Jerry, and we will see you later. Goodbye.